Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am, of course, Michael Zell, the Zell. Welcome back to Amateur Apologetics. Today, of course, I have my dearest sibling, one, the only, Lunar Smiles. Lunar, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing okay. Moved into the new place and doing my best to enjoy the Christmas time.
Awesome. Well, they say, there's a reason for Christmas, and this program sort of hovers, if not directly explains that. But on top of that, there's also a reason for the cultural Christmas that we experience. And I thought we'd start off a little different today, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So I watched this program on TV this morning with Pop, and I thought it was a really interesting explanation of how we got Santa Claus as like this primary figure in our culture, sort of thing. And so I'm going to turn the music down just a bit here. And it does have Christian roots in theory anyway. So sort of a, I don't know if it was Catholic necessarily, but certainly a Christian saint is who it was based off of. So I suspect it was probably Catholic at that point. Named a guy named Saint Nicholas, of course. And he was basically thought of early on in the development of the west of America, as like they basically used to do big cities used to do this thing where they wanted a patron saint, and they thought that a patron saint, Saint Nicholas, would be a good one because it's sort of the patron saint of giving, essentially, of gifts and that sort of thing, and so that's sort of where the genesis, if you will, of that story. Hey man, how's it going? Merry Christmas. That's where I guess the genesis of that story started to become more and more common. So they chose that for New York City of all places. The story of Saint Nick. And so in the Dutch, because it was primarily the Dutch roots of New York, they wanted to capture this idea. This guy basically unveiled it, and the Dutch name for Saint Nicholas is Sinterklaas, which is sort of his nickname, and that ended up becoming more anglicized and became Santa Claus, essentially. But it was actually the prominence of the story that we have today. So it was originally this idea that Saint Nicholas would ride across the sky on a horse-drawn carriage, basically, was the original idea. And that got blown up even more during the Civil War. And they wanted to engender a newspaper wanted to engender during these really horrible times this idea of hope again, and that's really what Santa Claus is meant to be about, at least the more cultural version of it. Wife says hi too. Perfect. Hi there. Yeah. But yeah, so essentially what they did was they printed this newspaper article that had sort of Santa Claus recognizing the soldier in the ditch and the wife at home, and sort of engendering this idea of this hopeful presence. And it actually helped people at the dire straits, not just during the war, but also eventually during like the Great Depression and everything like that. And it was after the Great Depression, I believe it's after, if I remember correctly. I'm just summarizing what I saw in the program. So this is none of my, hard-earned, researched thing. But basically this guy, who was sort of this, I think he was a lawyerly type. He was very, stern kind of father figure, but he really loved his children. And instead of like lavishing them with affection or doing these sort of, more, maybe we would call them more feminine or, genteel ways of caring for his kids, he decided to write poems. And he wrote this poem. And this is the poem I'm going to read to you guys today. This is very classic, of course. And it's sort of, I believe the original title is A Visit from Santa Claus, but we know it as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. So I'm going to read that to you guys. It's pretty short for the most part, but I like it, and I haven't read it in forever, so I thought, I kind of want to read this thing. I heard bits and pieces of it, but I thought it'd be fun.
Is this part of what made you decide this was that little thing this morning?
That's right, yeah. It kind of inspired me because we just happened to be, watching that today, so... All right. So, 'twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief, and I in my cap, had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap. When out on the roof there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutter, and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wind, the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry! His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin, well, it was white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew, like the down of a thistle. But I heard him explain, ere he drove out of sight, Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
Yay.
Classic.
Yeah, it is a classic, and I don't know if we ever really heard this as children. Like, we might have had it read to us once, but I don't really recall.
Well, what's funny is when you were starting at the beginning there, reminded me of Tim Allen's movie, The Santa Claus. It's like, what's a rose such a ladder? Oh, it's a clatter.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it's interesting because this version of Santa Claus is actually supposed to be an elf. The original conception in this poem was he's actually this tiny guy that he could fit down a chimney properly. So the idea that he's a big jolly fellow didn't come until after Basically, the Santa Claus parade was a big thing that started up with it was Macy's and another competitor. I can't quite remember. I just remember the Macy's day parade and what have you. Hey, Coco, welcome in. And then so like that came out primarily because of the department store Santa Claus. There was a guy who just sort of, said, I wonder if Santa Claus could like sell more stuff for me. And so he dressed up as a jolly guy. And there was, of course, those illustrations that started to make him from the actual poem. They started to...
Yeah, the dimples. The belly.
That's right. So it progressively went from like a skinny, tall, in robes Saint Nicholas in Deutschland, in the Dutch motherland sort of thing, who would go around giving basically getting the children's shoes or socks basically, but basically the shoes, filling them with toys, and then that would be for the good boys and girls. The idea of engendering this idea that doing good things ought to get something of a reward, but then giving coal to bad little boys and girls. And the interesting thing about that thing, from what I understand, I didn't get this from the program, but from what I gather, the idea isn't that you punish the bad boys or girls with coal. The idea is that actually you provide for their very basic need regardless. Because coal was in winter is like that's something you use to heat and to warm yourself, right?
Yeah, it's not a useless thing.
No, it was very important, and so they still got something that even though they might not enjoy it like a toy, right, which is sort of above and beyond basic grace,
necessities over luxuries.
Yeah. So it's I thought that was an interesting thing. But so I mean, what the heck does that have to do with Jesus? We're talking about Matthew today and going back to our continuation, and how does the figure of Santa Claus, even in today's culture, connect with Jesus of Nazareth, right? The guy who Christmas is clearly about, his birth essentially. Yeah. I think look, I'm not going to be like the major apologist of today's cultural Santa Claus kind of thing, but here's my take on it, and this is nevertheless I'm going to make a defense of both, obviously, because I'm more of a both and rather than an either or kind of guy anyway. I don't like to necessarily divide if I don't have to. The whole story of how Santa Claus basically came along with the whole Civil War and trying to help people and everything like that is essentially the same spirit. The spirit of Christmas is the same one, which is that of hope. Jesus was very much his birth, his Advent, they call it. So we have Advent calendars, but the promise of him to come, of Christ, is all about the hope for eternal life, the hope of redemption of sin, the hope of a fulfillment of the kingdom promises of the Old Testament, right? And Santa Claus, in some way, still engenders that idea of hope. And he has over almost a couple of centuries at least, expressed that same idea. And so I think that Santa Claus is a good thing. He is still named after a saint, and that person did actually exist, and he did, he was the patron saint of generosity, essentially, right? And to be generous and to have that that quality is a Christ-like quality, in my view. And so it's not wrong to say, Merry Christmas and still celebrate, with presents and giving and sharing, but in particular, in my view of it, it's one of those things that I think is about hope. And this is what's interesting about the idea of when children think about or say, does Santa Claus exist? I think there's, from a child point of view, as well as a mature point of view, a good reason to actually say yes. Right? And we want to say yes, that Santa Claus exists, at least in the spirit of what that tale and what that story is about, in the sense that hope still exists. There is a sense that one ought to engender in at least an idea, a belief that what is concrete isn't actually always the most real thing. The most real thing that we can actually express during these holidays is the ideas in which we aspire to, and the best versions of ourselves that we want to become and we want to show to others. And Christmas is one of those holidays, I think, in its purest form, that engenders that desire and shows and puts that best foot forward sort of thing with one another. And so, to me, I don't know. That's my personal take on it, and hopefully these holidays you're experiencing some of that. There's something about freshly fallen snow. We got almost 20 inches here. That makes me think clean slate. Purity, white, blessings. It might be cold, it might be wet, but it's still a time where you can kind of start over. The new year is coming in, which is, I think, why it's sort of back to back anyway with Christmas, is you're given lots of stuff and you can say, you know what, this last year is gone. Let's start anew. And I don't know, maybe it's because of what I've gone through the past few months or whatever, but I'm feeling quite a bit better myself. And I feel that hope of the season. I feel that, that goodness. So I'm hoping that 2024 is a good turnaround for all of y'all. So, but yeah. Anyway, I thought we could start off that way today.
That was a good start.
Good. Well, anything? Yeah, I mean, did you have any response to that, or anything to add, or detract? Even?
Nothing in particular. You did pretty good covering the best parts.
Cool. All right. Well, with that being all said, and my entertainment, at least to myself, I just really wanted to say the poem. Frankly, fundamentally, I had never said the thing out loud ever before. I've read it a few times, and I heard it, I'm sure, once or twice as a kid, or parts of it in movies and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a good time. Zell preaching his heart out. Yeah, that's right. There's not enough of these positive talks and explanations that more people should hear. I think so. I think people look. There is a tendency to be churlish and dismissive of tradition, or of religious things that matter quite a bit to some people, and I think if we take the time, and I say this on all traditions, it could be whatever, look, any religion, any culture, whatever, they're important to people for a reason. And without the reason, then you lose the import, and it behooves us to at least get that into our skulls. And that includes history, by the way. I think history is also an important... if we don't understand our own past and how things have sort of fallen apart or been built to get to the prosperity and to the height of achievement that we have, we're very quick to either repeat this is obviously an old saying, but to repeat those same mistakes, or to lose that which we have, which many people have built to achieve. So, yeah.
Without the proper imports, all you are is ants.
That's right. One of my favorite lines is that we stand on the shoulders of giants. This is usually talked about in a academic sense in terms of knowledge. So the idea of, we didn't suddenly discover that there were stars in the sky that were rotating, as well as like a big ball of fire that was, that we are rotating around and everything like that. There is somebody who had to really study that, and that person stood on the shoulders of the person who was able to even look at a cylinder and some lenses and think, oh, this could be a telescope. And that person had to be standing on the shoulders of, oh, I wonder if I can cook this sand or mold this metal into some shape that hasn't existed before. And so in the same sense, we in all of our cultural ideas and all of our technologies, and I would say even in all of our personal developments, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Our parents, our parents' parents, our ancestors. People have done things so amazing, and yet we so often dismiss that and say, oh, we're so great because we can have AI or iPhones and stuff like that. It's like, we're so much smarter than those people. It's like, no, we're only smart because those people existed and have done the things 100%. They've done. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So a little respect for the past, a little respect for the tradition, in my personal view. And
I do agree.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
We'd still be smashing rocks and sticks together if it wasn't for some of those amazing innovators.
Yeah. Yeah. Entire fields of knowledge, The interesting thing, I say this, okay, look, I'm going to pick on a little bit with the scientific types, mainly because I used to be much more of the scientific naturalist or the atheistic point of view. Yeah. Zell is onto something. Zell ain't wrong. I love it. But like the irony of science is that it used to be called natural theology or natural philosophy, one of the two. And so, like, its actual root has always come from the idea that, at least from a Christian point of view, that there is some sort of absolute truth in which one can base your life on. And that those principles exist not just out in the ether or not randomly, just randomly determined, but they actually exist as a property or from the basis of the idea that truth exists at all, and that truth is fundamentally rooted in the person of God. I find that entertaining anyway. So people often dismiss the history of science, which very much is rooted in philosophy and religion. So it's kind of interesting. And at that, let's pop on over to our reading for today. Now that I've talked a lot and read a bunch, I'll force Lunar to do the same thing.
All right, just give me a second.
Yeah, no rush. Oh, I gotta reload. There we go.
I was out fulfilling my lungs' desire.
Ah, it's good. It's good times.
Yeah.
All right.
Almost there.
No rush. So yeah, we're doing Matthew 9 today. So I'll just quickly do a recap on what's been going down. So the first couple of chapters basically describes the virgin birth, that an angel came to a couple named Mary and Joseph, which is this is the whole Christmas story. I'm just wrapping it up for you guys. If you actually don't know what Christmas is about, this is what it is. So the first, I think, 3 or 4 chapters has to do with this, where Jesus essentially is proclaimed, or there's the advent given by an angel. You find out in Luke that his name's Gabriel. There's only 2 angels that are actually talked about in the canon of Scripture from the Protestant point of view, which is Gabriel and Michael, which I'm named after Michael, which I'm sort of cocky of, but not. Anyway, so the angel Gabriel comes and talks to Mary and Joseph, who were distant cousins and descended from the kings of old, mainly King David, and so they do have a rightful place in the throne in the kingdom by lineage in terms of their physical descent. And so basically Joseph is told by Gabriel, hey, your wife's pregnant by God, the Holy Spirit. It's a spontaneous birth. She didn't cheat on you. Relax. You can marry her. Definitely go and do that. Protect them. Go down to Egypt if you have to, because there's some bad guys that kind of, don't want this thing to happen. And they were informed by these 3 magi, or these wise men. These, more properly, they're wise men. So scholars from the East. They came to follow this star, and they basically told the king of the time, King Herod, hey, where's this baby? Where's this new king that's coming out? And they're just assuming that it's going to be like Herod's kid or something, right? He's like, oh yeah, go and find him for me. And then, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, tell me where he is, because I'm going to go kill him, is really what he wanted to do. But they found Jesus in a manger, So they went back to Bethlehem. There was a census from the Roman government. They wanted to know how many Jews were in the area, kind of thing. So they went back to Bethlehem, which is, I believe it was David's hometown, essentially. And Mary was pregnant at the time, had birth in a manger, because there was basically everybody that was Jewish, they had to go to their hometown to go for the census. That was the law. And so all the inns and all the things, all the places that you could possibly stay were all booked up for the night. So, well, I got a place out back with the pigs and with the horses and stuff. Probably not pigs, Jewish, but still, you get the idea. Basically, they're warned to run away to Egypt after the Magi visit them and everything like that. And that's really what the whole holiday season is about, is the first couple of chapters. And you'll see that there's two different accounts where we already read Matthew, which is the main account, one of the main accounts. Luke is a little bit more clinical and more explicit in some of the details. So you get like the Gabriel naming and everything like that for the angel. After that, basically, Jesus comes back from Egypt. We don't know for out of how many years, but he's found later, probably in his, we're probably thinking 9 to 12-ish age. Goes to the temple and shows up all the priests that are there. That, I have quite a bit of knowledge on how God's kingdom works, because he is God in flesh. And they're all amazed and stuff. And after that, Jesus begins his ministry, starting off with John the Baptist, who is this he was the how did I call him? The homeless guy with the sign, kind of guy at the time. He was a wild man, talking about repentance, to turn from the sins and everything like that. And Jesus gets baptized from him. God speaks, saying, "This is my son. Listen to what he has to say." And then he begins his primary preachings of basically the Sermon on the Mount is how it's structured. And we just basically finished that up. We're about to finish it up. Yeah, we just finished it up. And now he's going around doing miracles of casting out demons, having a few lessons here and there. And this is where we are now. Matthew 9 continues on with that. And this is probably this is where the controversy of Jesus comes from. What he's been saying, what he's been teaching has been insightful and hard. A lot of his lessons are sort of cutting to the bone of who people are and how they actually believe and follow God. And now he's doing something that no other preacher, no other rabbi, a teacher, has ever done, for good reason, and we'll find out. If you want to pick up there, Lunar.
Alrighty. The Son of Man forgives and heals. So he got into a boat, crossed over, and came to his own town. Just then, some men brought him to a paralytic lying on a mat. Seeing their faith, Jesus told the paralytic, "Have courage, son, your sins are forgiven." At this, some of the scribes said among themselves, "He's blaspheming." But perceiving their thoughts, Jesus said, "Why are you thinking evil things in your hearts? For which is easier to say, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up and walk'? So you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." Then he told the paralytic, "Get up, pick up your mat, and go home." And he got up and went home. When the crowd saw this, they were awestruck and gave glory to God, who had given such authority to men.
So in this day and age, the idea that anybody but God could explicitly say, "Hey, your sins are forgiven," was blasphemy. It was a charge that could be, you could be killed for, essentially.
Yeah.
And what made them pause, obviously, and I talked about this last time, what made them pause it's not just that Jesus is teaching very difficult things, right? Or saying amazing stuff in some of those words, but he's backing it up by miracles every time he does it. And that's what this whole section's about. I'm telling you this as fact, and I'm backing it up by my miraculous actions, that God is with me, that I'm not even doing that, but that God is fulfilling the miracles that I'm performing, essentially, you know? So that's why they didn't kill him. It's like, oh, well, you know, we already know that God's the only one who can do things like heal. Like, the devil doesn't do that. So it seems like an authentication, and they just don't know what to do with them now. So they're kind of stuck. A lot of these, like, high up, you know, clergy kind of thing, they're stumped. They're not only stumped by him in terms of the fact that he's authenticating things, but the things he says are often cutting against them and what they've been teaching. So anyway, it's pretty interesting.
I can see how that would press a sensitive button.
All right, if you want to continue here. Oops.
The Call of Matthew.
So
as Jesus...
Sorry,
okay.
I think my thing is messed up here. There we go. My mouse was messed up. Okay.
As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting in the tax office, and he said to him, "Follow me." So he got up and followed him. That easy. While he was reclining at the table in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came as guests to eat with Jesus and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Where does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" When he heard this, he said, "Those who are well don't need a doctor, but the sick do. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I didn't come to call the righteous, but sinners." Interesting.
So this is again something that is absolutely contrary to the Jewish tradition. So for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, so long as there was a temple that existed in Jerusalem, the Jewish people had something called the Levitical priesthood, which is a specialized version. It's a specialized tribe in the tribes of Israel, based on Levi, of course. And their job was to take care of the temple sacrifices. They literally had to sacrifice a certain amount of animals every year to cover with blood the sins of the people of Jerusalem. The Jewish people, essentially, that nation. And so, gotta admit, this is my kind of Sunday service. Nice. That's awesome. I appreciate that, man. And so the entire culture of the Jewish people was this recognition that you need to sacrifice something important to God in order for your sins to be recognized as covered, as, you know, paid for. Because if you do something evil, somebody has to die for it. That's the concept. Is like, if you really kill your brother, even if it's only in your heart, right, then something's died. Something is, you know, something has been so sinned against that you need to pay for it somehow, right? And so either it's an eye for an eye, which is, you know, or tooth for a tooth, which is the Old Testament thing, or somebody gets away with murder, right? So that's basically how the law works in the Old Testament. Is if you kill somebody's cow, you have to at least pay for that amount, the amount that cow was worth, or they get your cow, right? That was the balance idea. And now he's saying straight up, if Jesus is claiming to be God, and he says, "I desire mercy and not sacrifice," that goes radically against what the Jewish people understood the Levitical law to be like, or at least that's how they were teaching it, which isn't necessarily true, but it's certainly the way it was designed to recognize the magnitude of sin, that there are consequences, and to atone for that. And that's what atonement means, is to make up for, right? So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So yeah, I think I really like the idea of, I use this one all the time, the idea that people who are sinners, who do something wrong, willfully or not, are no different than people who are sick. And they're the ones who need the teacher. They're the ones who need the doctor to heal. You know, if you're clean, if you are not sinners, or if you're not, you know, if you're the high muckety mucks, then you don't need a doctor. You know, if you're absolutely healthy, right? So don't worry about it, right? And that's who he came to call, was the people who are broken, the people who are sick and need God. That's who Jesus came for. The people who just want to be buddy with him because he's a celebrity and stuff, he don't want nothing to do with that, right? So yeah. Anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah, it really does make sense, though. I mean, if you're not, like, for example, the sick person, if you don't get them a doctor, then like they're lost. They're gonna die without intervention.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, if you want to continue.
A question about fasting. Then John's disciples came to him, saying, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast?" Jesus said to them, "Can the wedding guests be sad while the groom is with them? The time will come when the groom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast. No one patches an old garment with unshrunk cloth, because the patch pulls away from the garment and makes the tear worse. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the skins burst, the wine spills out, and the skins are ruined. But they put new wine into fresh wineskins, and both are preserved."
So this is obviously a cultural thing that's being expressed. So the first one is, let me just go back up here for a second. So just a quick explanation on fasting. This was also basically he's targeting, or at least Matthew is writing it so that it looks like he's targeting these major religious practices of fasting, of the temple sacrifices and everything like that. That's what he's really alluding to here. And what I loved about Jesus the first time I ever listened to the guy is that he really wasn't interested in all the what we call now the liturgical or prescribed religious practices, at least not in the same way. What it seems like he's saying, and there's going to be a lot of people who push back on me on this one because there's a few different views, but to me, what it seems like he's saying is that the liturgical pre-prescribed practices aren't the point. It's the spirit of why you're doing it that's the important thing. And so when he's saying is like, there's a time to fast. Absolutely. You should fast 100%. But in this case, since the idea is that he's the groom, he's the one to be celebrated, it's my birthday. It's a time for the people who are around me, who are being welcomed to be in that wedding party, to celebrate, to enjoy my birthday, for example. I'm just giving another example. Then that's the appropriate thing to do, is to not fast. You don't go to somebody's birthday with some birthday cake and say, "No, I'm fasting, sorry." And you don't go to a birthday and say, it's like, and there's steaks and this big party and just, "Hey, come and celebrate with me." And you say, "Nah, I'm cool, man. I'm just gonna have some water." You usually, it's more, at least in this culture, it's culturally appropriate to celebrate with that person. If you go to a wedding, you have a drink, you party down, you dance when you don't dance, you sing when you don't sing, because it is a celebration of these friends, these people, that you love being joined together. And that's essentially what he's saying here is, you guys can be religious in terms of your practices all you want, but at this moment in time, the true spirit of why I'm here has nothing to do with those things. When I'm gone, then you can fast, then you can cry and stuff like that, but you celebrate now because I'm here, So, in terms of, this still works today. If you were to take a patch onto like something that's been rugged, let's say a leather coat, right? A leather coat has been beaten down, it's worn, it's experience water and tearing and sun and all that stuff, you don't sew a brand new patch that hasn't actually shrunk down yet, because if it does and you sew it on there, then it's going to pull apart the actual seams and it's not going to actually fit properly. So you need something that's been worn down at least at an equal measure as whatever you're patching it onto. So that's an actual thing that you can experience today if you wanted to, and that works for different, cloth and everything like that. Stuff shrinks and all that stuff.
Makes sense.
And in terms of wineskins were obviously, skins of leather and everything like that usually absorbed or warped to a certain amount of liquid. And if you try and patch that thing, then you're just going to get a hole in it. It's not going to actually patch for very long once it starts changing up. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense. I wanted to touch on that. All right. If you want to continue there.
Getting it back. All right. A girl restored and a woman healed. He was telling them these things. Suddenly, one of the leaders came and knelt before him, saying, "My daughter is near death, but come and lay your hand on her and she will live." So Jesus and his disciples got up and followed him. Just then, a woman who had suffered from bleeding for 12 years approached from behind and touched the tassel on his robe. For she said to herself, "If I can just touch his robe, I'll be made well." But Jesus turned and saw her. "Have courage, daughter," he said. "Your faith has made you well." And the woman was made well from that moment. When Jesus came to the leader's house, he saw the flute players and the crowd laminating loudly. "Leave," he said, "because the girl isn't dead, but sleeping." And they started laughing at him. But when the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl got up. And this news spread throughout the whole area. Don't lose hope before, hope is lost.
Yeah. And the other thing, the woman who is bleeding for 12 years, the idea that a person's faith is so strong that you don't really need even the person themselves. This is the idea of, can Coco? Yeah, absolutely. If you have any questions, I was actually going to be just about to say that too. If anybody has any questions or any pushback at all of what I say, please feel free to share. I certainly welcome that. But yeah, in this case, the one of the theological oddities to this is, did Jesus consciously heal her, or was Jesus sort of, is Jesus magical, essentially? Is it just like, can you just touch the guy and you'll get healed? And that's actually a really interesting theological topic that ends up coming up, is that, is Jesus the one responsible for healing? That's the real question here. Or is God, the Father, walking and recognizing the people who have faith in Christ and then affirming the miracles through the Holy Spirit? That's probably the theological, like the Trinitarian theology behind that I would say is probably happening. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. So this, you'll find that, I mean, it much later, but take note of this, just touching his robe and being healed becomes significant much later along down the road in the Book of Acts. So it's kind of neat.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to Book of Acts.
Yeah.
I don't remember that one at all.
If you want, like, we don't have to do, Mark and Luke after this. We could just go to Acts after this because it's long enough.
Well, you said the first four are very similar in their storytelling and stuff like that. So, yeah, that definitely seems like an option. Then we can come back to Luke later.
Exactly, yeah. And that'd be kind of fun. So,
sure.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That'd be kind of neat. It does give it more of a linear progression. And what we could do, if we wanted to, we could do Acts, and we probably come back to Mark, because Mark is more of like it's suggested that Mark is sort of the basis for Luke, if I remember correctly. because
Okay.
his is the truncated short version of the gospel. His is only 16 chapters. This is 26, I think, or 28. And I think Luke is somewhere around 28 as well.
Okay.
So what we could do is after we do Mark, we could even pop by and see what's up with some of Paul's letters, for example, or particularly Romans. Romans is a very long letter, and it's Paul's letter to the Roman, all the Roman Christians that happen to be after the book of Acts, or at least during, maybe.
Okay.
But yeah, Coco, if you did have a question there, definitely feel free to ask whatever you want.
We appreciate the consideration.
I see your tags: theology, philosophy, and psychology, as well as Christian. How do you approach such topics like astrology with biblical knowledge? So I'm a astronomy guy more than an astrology guy. Astrology, the issue of astrology is in the idea that it has any prophetic or future telling or control would probably be the better word over an individual's life. That's not to say that there may or may not be some influence there. What celestial bodies, what the movement of the sun and the moon and the stars has on physically on people, which I think is a different version, at least in my view, of what astrology is. So my view is that it's not something that is accurate, I suppose. So horoscopes, particularly in a broad sense, if they match up with you, then they match up with you. But I guarantee you, if there's however many billions of people on planet Earth who, hey Grace, welcome in. However many people on planet Earth who have the birthday like myself, January 16th, and a Capricorn reading is not going to match all of us, and therefore it's inherently subjective.
You're supposed to learn that on your own.
I have something to
absolutely.
add to that. So astrology to me kind of ties in and is very similar to like the Chinese zodiac in a similar way, where they sort of depict archetypes of people that you could fall into that. But I mean, January 16th in a different year also is a different Chinese zodiac. So I feel like those can kind of go hand in hand together to sort of bring out more of that archetype of what kind of person that you can be and sort of blend those two together in a way. But the thought of just things being written in the stars sort of thing, that I mean, I myself am a Virgo, and I actually kind of fit a Virgo pretty well. But with astrology, there's more than just your sun sign. There's the moon sign, the rising, and each planet has their own alignment with your astrological sign as well. So you can, even though I'm a Virgo for my sun sign, just based solely on my date of birth, like my rising or my moon sign is Leo, if I remember correctly, something like that. But yeah, astrology can get kind of deep, but it's more like archetypal type knowledge, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and again, like it's that's I guess my definition probably is a little bit more, what would you say? Simplistic. It's a simplistic view of astrology. Fundamentally, what my view of it is, what my concern of it is, and what my main concern in Christianity is truth, right? What is objectively true in something,
right?
And my fear or my hesitation, and this would be on pretty much anything to do with mystic, magical, anything, even though I find those topics very fascinating. Don't get me wrong, I think it's interesting, but I don't put any stock in it because I fear that it is not true, that it is a obscuration of what is true. And so seeing certain traits and applying to them the locus of control, or the how would you say, the determining prophetic factor, the divination of the stars, and that somehow is causal in nature, that it affects your personality, that it tells the future and stuff like that. That's the thing that I fear is based in untruth, and that's what I don't like about it. So I put it in the same category, I suppose, as ghosts, which I generally don't put a lot of stock into. But I'm also fairly I struggle against my tendencies toward the modern, the scientific. Ironically, that's how I grew up, was being a very clinically cold, fact-based person rather than
that makes sense, because you really do like the Myers-Briggs test as well. But I feel like the Myers-Briggs test is slightly more limited compared to astrology, but sort of relates in the same way, where it's more of an archetype of a person that you could be, kind of thing. But at least with Myers-Briggs, it's based on like how you're answering these questions to figure this out, instead of something being predetermined in the stars.
It's not so astrology bothers me because it's prescriptive. It's like, oh, you're a Capricorn and you have these signs or you have these traits, then you need to do this. Whereas Myers-Briggs doesn't say that. It says, based on what you've given me, the information you've given me, this is the likely type of person that you are, and you may or may not swing to these tendencies given the certain circumstances. Which is not prescriptive, it's descriptive. It's different.
That makes sense.
And so that's where I, and this is, again, I put it in the same category as tarot cards and everything like that, where it's telling you should do something, and it's based off of what I don't know, right? Is it based off of something somebody wrote randomly and said, well, I just felt really bad on the fourth moon of the year, and I happen to be in this thing, and this person felt like this, so I'm going to prescribe this to everybody who falls in those, categories. And I'm not saying that there isn't anything to be said about that. I'm just saying I fear the authority that often comes behind the astrology thing. Like, I know what I'm talking about. I'm absolutely sure that this is, how you ought to act if you're this sign under these circumstances. I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that, But
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do believe that there, in particular, the moon, like the different phases of the moon clearly have different effects on nature. There's no reason to think that doesn't have effects on on persons as well, on their psychology, on their circumstances. So to just dismiss it out of hand, I don't want to do that. I want to give credit where credit is due, but I also want a bit of evidence for it. I want a bit more.
I'm sure if you dig deep enough, you might be able to find a bit more scientific in the reason why astrology does what it does. But everything with a grain of salt, right?
Yeah, and naturally, my basis for that opinion comes from my fairly deeply rooted belief in what the Bible says and what Christianity upholds. And so if there are any explicit or implicit beliefs or practices that go against that, then I tend to, not necessarily always out of turn, but I tend to be at the height of my skepticism and say, I don't know if I believe that. I'm not sure if that's I trust this partly because I've actually done the study and I've gone through to great lengths of, reading that sort of thing. So, but still, I'm also fine. I'm fine with being wrong. I've been wrong a lot. So, it's good. Speaking about tarot cards, do you think there's any difference between tarot cards and angelic tarot cards? Cards with angels on them, coming from a biblical standpoint? No, not really. Here's the contrast between tarot cards and belief in as a Christian. Fundamentally, faith or trust, better word, faith is a fancy word for trust, is the way I always say it. But trust in God is one of the primary, if not the foundational, follower of Christ traits, is to trust that God has a plan and that he's doing this thing, and to trust him enough to pray and to seek wisdom and guidance in that. Whereas tarot cards, in my view, tend to be, again, prescriptive over specific instances that take the place on the guidance of the fundamental principles and laws of God. And so one seems less, so tarot cards in my mind seem less about trust and more about control, trying to get some sort of insight so that you can control your circumstances. Whereas trust in God is, I recognize that I don't have any control, and that there is somebody whom I can trust that does have control, even in the worst possible circumstances. So those two concepts to me clash a little bit. And regardless if you add the angelic or the demonic or the ghost or the saints or whatever you want to add to the cards, you're still attempting to wrestle control. And so principally, that's my where I think my objections would probably be. So
that makes sense. I actually do tarot myself as well, and I've looked up online for like the different card patterns and layouts that you can do, and there's a lot of misconception. Like there's a lot of confusion, in my opinion, where it's like, especially around like the Celtic cross one that I do. It's like the different positions mean a certain thing, and not everyone seems to agree on one thing. It's like there's a lot of different interpretations, even on the cards themselves, whether it's based on the artwork or even just translations or whatever. So like the instruction booklet in each of these decks that you can get can very much say different things.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, we've done tarot. Like I again, it's not that I dismiss it out of turn. Part of my views on tarot come from experience. Like, and again, I haven't gone through every possible version of tarot and tarot readings and gone to the length that some have. But in what experience I do have, they've simply been inaccurate or inconsequential in their reading. I can read what I want them to be read at some level. And fundamentally, especially if I'm the subject, or if the authority is subjective, even from somebody who's reading for me, it's exactly that. The point of view, you can end up sort of always authenticating your own personal perspective and dismissing any objective like measure to it. And so I guess that's what I'm agreeing with you, is what primarily bothers me is there doesn't seem to be a consistency in authority as to how to do it, what to read into it, and how, what would I say? How important what is read is on your life. Whereas that's the opposite I get from Scripture. It is very accurate, in my view, to reality, and it is claiming, at the very least, to be a historical story about a people and a person and what he has done and what he will do. And so that's different. Tarot isn't a history. Tarot isn't a story in the sense of being rooted in something with that foundation, I guess. And so I'm not just going to claim that it's for sure 100% factual in everything. I'm not going to go there, but it's still been around for a while, and it's radically transformed culture to a degree that you can't imagine the difference that it would be without it, so I'm not sure I can say that about tarot. Maybe you can, but yeah. So good. See you typing there, Lunar. So
yeah, I was just for something afterwards. It's nothing important right now.
Cool. All right. Well, shall we continue? What else? I think that was everything about. Hopefully that answered your question, Coco. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your perspective. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and again, I'm not going to claim that I am the arbiter of truth here. My primary desire, look, I think this is a great conversation, and if people continue to believe and seek that stuff out, that's fine. All I can do is say, well, this is how I can take it, and please provide your own perspective of whether or not your beliefs and your practices serve you and they get you what you want. Why are you doing what you're doing, kind of thing, right? And if tarot gets you what you want and bigs you up, then I'm not gonna be like, oh, okay, well, that's clearly that's what your view is, and that's fine. So yeah, cool. Shall we heal some blind people?
Sure. We'll heal the blind. How sublime.
Mm-hmm.
As Jesus went on from there, 2 blind men followed him, shouting, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." When he entered the house, the blind men approached him, and Jesus said to them, "Do you believe that I can do this?" "Yes, Lord," they answered him. Then he touched their eyes, saying, "Let it be done for you according to your faith." And their eyes were opened. Then Jesus warned them sternly, "Be sure that no one finds out." But they went out and spread the news about him throughout that whole area. So he's bringing up to just don't brag. But they did anyway.
Yeah, he says it a lot. He doesn't. I get the sense that Jesus really doesn't want more attention than he can sort of handle. And you got to think, like, he not only because it's a pride thing, like, oh, don't talk about me sort of thing, and being humble. It's also a matter of logistics. Like, he's got a mission, and he's, to me, at least, especially in Mark expresses this idea that Jesus immediately goes to this place and then immediately crosses the sea to another place. It doesn't seem like he's just wandering willy-nilly. He's got a mission. He's got a thing he's doing every step of the way. And so when the way I get it, at least, and again, I might be wrong on this, but in my view of it, it seems like when Jesus says, "Don't tell people about this. I finished my mission here. I've got more stuff to do. I can't be always swarmed by millions of people. I've got something to do." Right? And so I think there's actually a practicality to what his saying this as well, where it's like, but you end up finding out that, of course, people do talk about him, and then he gets in these situations, which I'm sure will come up in the near future here. So, but yeah. All right.
Driving out a demon. So here comes an exorcist again, I'm sure. All right, just as they were going out, a demon-possessed man who was unable to speak was brought to him. When the demon had been driven out, the man spoke, and the crowds were amazed, saying, "Nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel." But the Pharisees said, "He drives out demons by the ruler of the demons."
Ooh, that's a hell of a charge.
That is a hell of a claim for sure.
Literally a hell of a charge. Sorry, I missed your comment here, Coco. I mean, I agree with what you guys said. Makes sense. I really like this open dialogue, the concept of agree to disagree. Yeah, again, it's, look, I'm going to be pretty stern or pretty adamant in certain basic facts of Christianity. And but like, at the same time, just because those are facts does not mean that anybody is either A, open to hearing them, right? Or B, that I have some sort of martial capacity or desire to impose that upon people. Like, if people want to believe what they believe, that's their freedom to do so. Fundamentally, that's fine. Like, I believe in freedom. I believe in having that. But I also believe in the ability to say that there are consequences to believing what you believe and pointing those things out, positive or negative, right? I can point out the positives of not believing what I believe. I can actually point out even better the consequences of believing what I believe, which a lot of people don't want to do, right? There are consequences of becoming a Christian. There are demands, there are obligations, there are responsibilities that you actually have. And it really does put you in a position of scrutiny and what would you say? Yeah, I guess scrutiny is the best word I can come up with it, right? Like, you're under the microscope. Your actions are viewed differently as soon as you say something like that, whether you know it or not. So, I always like to put it in the perspective of there are consequences and benefits to anything that anybody believes, that there is a pro and con. There are lots of benefits for lying, for example. I'm not saying anybody lies here, but just as an example, right? You have the immediate escape from responsibility and consequences of your actions by lying. That's a pretty good boon. That's actually really great. Now, in the long term, that might not be a great winning strategy. There are consequences to it as well. So, in my mind, that's the way I look at everybody's belief systems, right? And all I can do is say, well, is it true? Why is it true? Is it working for you? Why is it, or is it not working for you? And that's the conversation I hope to engender. Is, I'm not gonna, like I said, I don't believe in martial law. It don't work. It makes it's counterproductive. Okay. So, did I read yours? Absolutely. Anyone should be free to practice and or believe what they wish if it works for them and raises them up and out of negative energies. Yeah, that's great. Sweet. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, driving out demons by the ruler of demons is a hell of a charge. But it's interesting because he in other versions that's actually a point that Jesus sort of picks on. He's like, well, actually, and he kind of that I believe it's the book of Luke, if I remember correctly, because Luke is very much the historian. He's the apologist, right? Okay. He's the one who kind of pushes back. Jesus in the book of Matthew seems to be much more prescriptive and just expresses things and lets them sit. He's not going to explain jack.
Yeah, they don't explain much in this one. They're just like, they brought a man that was possessed by a demon who didn't speak, and then suddenly he was driven out, and now he can speak.
Yeah, yeah. So it's definitely interesting.
To the point.
All right.
Oh, the Lord of the harvest. Then Jesus went to all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he felt compassion for them, because they were weary and worn out, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is abundant, but the workers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest."
Mm-hmm. One of the things I'll point out just off the top of my head in this one is there are a lot of people. I mean, you even have it where I think we had it is in Catholic school, like Sunday school or whatever.
Yeah.
We'll get Bibles of the Good News Bible, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
Everybody talks about this good news, but they always take it out of context. I don't think the correct understanding of the good news is the good news of Jesus Christ, because the good news of Jesus Christ is still about something, and this is exactly what it's about. This is the more specific. He's talking about the good news of the kingdom. It's the kingdom that is the good news, not just him, which is a really interesting concept. And it's really deep in the whole of Jewish culture. I think I kind of mentioned it last time about what the kingdom means to the people of Israel at this time. It means the land, it means the people, and it means the king himself and the relationship between those things. And
yep.
so, yeah. And so so it's really important to recognize that the real version, or the truest or fullest version of the kingdom, of the good news, is the good news of the kingdom, not just of Jesus, which is a part of the kingdom. Like, he's the king, which is really important, but it's also the relationship that the king has to his people and the people to the land that are provided, whether that's heaven, whether that's the place on earth. That's the important bit. So
yeah, this is the second time that the kingdom was mentioned in this way in Matthew. Earlier, when Satan came to Jesus and brought him up to the mountain, he talked about the kingdom and stuff like that. So the king, the people, not just the castle kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I think a lot of people, I don't know, there's a lot of people who fail to get the totality of what Jesus means, right? And what his entire story and his mission was, right? So, hey, Zell, glad I caught your stream. I really enjoying this, especially on Christmas Eve. Yeah. Oh, welcome, Ashley. Appreciate that. So, so anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Again, if anybody does have any questions or wants to focus on something I said, whether you disagree or agree, absolutely, feel free to put it in the comments. I'll do my best to be concise. I do have a bad habit of going on tangents or going, into great length, but that's because for whatever knowledge I do have, it tends to be something of a spider web. So everything is sort of connected, and that's what you'll see in scripture, period, right? In the Bible, it's like you'll often see in the margins, reference, Matthew 50, Matthew 23 verse 3 or something like that. And then it'll have like another bunch of references, and it goes back to, to Genesis and to Exodus and to, all these different places along scripture. So it really is, if you look at all the connective concepts in scripture, it is a spider web. It is really interconnected. It's really cool that way. So, but anyway, welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Shall we go to Matthew 10?
Sure. I have about half an hour left.
Cool. Yeah. Well, we should be able to get through it.
All right. Commissioning the 12. Summoning his 12 disciples, he gave them authority over unclean spirits to drive them out and to heal every disease and sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collectors, James the son of Alphaeus, right, and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. Jesus sent out these 12 after giving them instructions. Don't take the road leading to other nations, and don't enter any Samaritan town. Instead, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As you go, announce this: the kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those with skin diseases, drive out demons. You have received free of charge, give free of charge. Don't take along gold, silver, or copper for your money belts. Don't take a traveling bag for the road, or an extra shirt, sandals, or walking stick, for the worker is worthy of his food. When you enter any town or village, find out who is worthy and stay there until you leave. Greet a household when you enter it, and if the household is worthy, let your peace be on it. But if it is unworthy, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, shake the dust off your feet when you leave that house or town. I assure you, it will be more tolerable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than for that town. That's an interesting chapter. Beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, he said earlier, it's like the ability to forgive sins is given to man. So any of his disciples apparently in this chapter can do whatever he's been doing in the past in Matthew 9 and 8, healing, driving out demons, stuff like that.
Exactly right. And that's why I have the position I do theologically on what exactly is happening when Jesus heals. I always ask the question, so the question is Jesus God? And also the question is always, is Jesus man? The answer is always yes. The question is, in what capacity is Jesus God, and in what capacity is Jesus man? What's the point of him becoming, if Jesus, I don't like saying that, but if Jesus is God enfleshed in a human being, what was the purpose of it? And I would suggest to you that the purpose of it is to empty out the power of God to experience humanity as a man is supposed to experience it. But with the mission that God has given him, which technically is what every human being ought to be doing. We all have a mission. We all have something that only we have been created for. I really believe this, by the way. You have talents, you have flaws, you have things and places and people in your life that are very specific to you. And without you, I suppose, accepting the commission, whatever that might be specifically to you, without accepting that, you don't get fulfilled. You don't reach the pinnacle of whatever you were meant to be. Now, that's always going to be different for every person, right? So it's very important not to look at Jesus and see him being able to, heal, let's say, hundreds and dozens anyway of people and cast out demons and stuff like that and say, well, I'm a failure because I haven't done any of that. Well, that's because it's not your job. Your job could be making a boat, making shoes. You could be a carpenter. You could be a tailor. It doesn't, like, your specific mission is neither better nor worse than another's. It's just yours. And to be able to look in the mirror and say, yeah, I'm doing that, is one of the things that's going to make you, in my view, feel like you have that purpose and you have that achievement in life. And that's not always going to be like a singular thing either. Your mission could easily be, I just talk to somebody every day. I'll put it in this way. My view is that at some point in my journey every day, there is one person that I talk to and I say one thing to them. It could just be, hi, how are you? And then listening to them, that fulfills my purpose for that day. It doesn't have to be glamorous. It doesn't have to be crazy. I don't have to be the greatest preacher in the world who's on a pedestal in front of 5 or 10 or 20,000 people on a stage who are listening to me in adoration or in hatred. It doesn't matter, right? That's not my purpose. Whatever my purpose is my purpose for that day. And some people find their gift. They have a gift of music. They have a gift of math. They have a gift of science. Maybe their gift is to do astrology or something like that. I don't know, but it fits in the plan and the intention of God to bring about the greatest conceivable good in the world. It's not all about me. It's not all about you. It's about all of us under him. And that's, I think, so that connects to the idea that Jesus was trying to fulfill that exact same thing for him. And that's this story. And he's the main character. We're secondary and tertiary characters in this entire journey, in terms of the entire story of all things, right? God is the main character, at least from this perspective. But that doesn't mean that we're not important or that we're unimportant. We have a part to play, and without it, the story's not the same, So anyway, that was my rant for the day. So,
that was good.
All that to be said here.
Mind blown.
Mind blown. I see that. I love the part. I also love the part that you've been given free of charge, give free of charge. Look, an extremely important principle in life is people who are greedy likely have had things stolen from them, likely have missed out on a lot of things. It usually comes from a place of hurt, you know. But those who are usually like, they just seem to give freely, and they just are people who can count their blessings, people who can really say, man, I've been given so much, how could I possibly charge? Like, I say that, look, I'm not the most fiscally giving necessarily. If I have money, I'll give it. I'm not too harsh that way, but what I do recognize, at least in the way I have been forgiven, right? And that's where this is kind of tying into the whole principle, you know, is how could I possibly dismiss somebody who is in the height of their sin when I myself have been to jail for extremely nasty things? You know, I have lied and I've cheated and I've stolen and I've done all these things and yet have been forgiven. You know, that's, how could I not do the same? Right? How can I withhold the same grace that was given to me? And that's what this line is very much about. Zell goes, speaks his mind and heart, narrator on this last episode on Dragon Ball Z. That's right. But yeah, to go.
Ball Zell.
That's right, Dragon Ball Zell. I like it. This also goes to what you were talking about earlier, Lunar, too. Is this understanding that the person who is really behind all the miracles that Jesus is doing is not Jesus the man, which is why the idea of God being three people in one being, right? Three persons in one, is actually important. It seems like pulling hairs, but in terms of an actual theological, what would you say, theological foundation or underpinning of the Trinity, it's recognizing that Jesus doesn't do any of the God stuff. He's meant to be God limiting himself and deferring to the Father. And so the same things that Jesus does as a man, we can do as a man. We can do as human beings. We can heal if God is the one who sanctions it. So that's what he does, is he basically sanctioning, which is really neat. Hashtag Dragon Ball Zell. I'm going to use that in the future for sure. You have no idea. Yeah, so it's good. All right. If you want to continue, I'll try.
Persecutions predicted. You'll try what?
I'll try to be more concise. I just literally said that before and then went on an entire like rant or whatever, you know, preaching thing there. So I'll be less, I swear.
No worries. You good. Well, look, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as serpents and as harmless as doves, because people will hound you over their Sanhedrins and flog you in their synagogues. Beware of them. You will even be brought before governors and kings because of me, to bear witness to them and to the nations. But when they hand you over, don't worry about how or what you should speak, for you will be given what to say at that hour, because you are not speaking, but the Spirit of your Father is speaking through you. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will even rise up against their parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of my name, but the one who endures to the end will be delivered. When they persecute you in one town, escape to another, for I assure you, you will not have covered the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. A disciple is not above his teacher, or a slave above his master. It is enough for a disciple to become like his teacher, and a slave like his master. If they called the head of the house Beelzebul, how much more the members of his household?
We're saying, watch out, man. If they came at me, they're going to come at you, which is kind of true for everybody who tries to tell the truth.
Yeah, and he even talks about betrayal too, speaking like Judas was one of the disciples that went out and fulfilled that exact thing.
There's another line. I don't know if it's one of the things he says later on, I think, is actually, I think we might have watched it or read it already, but I can't quite remember. But the line essentially is, you think that I've come to unite? No, I've come to divide with a sword, to cut down the middle. And that's why I actually think it's one of those. Look, I realize that, especially in our society today, that gentleness and inclusivity and acceptance of people is sort of the law of the land right now, right? That it's the primary trait that is expressed, I guess. Which is why when somebody comes down and says, no, this is the way things are, and rubs up against people who might think differently, that's when people get angry. That's when people start really fighting things. And so when somebody's, especially if you say something is right or wrong from a legal point of view, let alone from a moral, soulful point of view, this is why people persecute. It's been happening to the Jewish people for a long time, and it happens to happen to Christians a lot too, because they claim, at the very least, even if they're right or wrong, it doesn't matter, they claim that this is true north right here, and anybody who is off by a degree or not, what ideally they would do is say, no, that's incorrect, and they would do exactly what Jesus has asked them to do, which is, where is it here? Be shrewd as serpents and as harmless as doves. Instead, a lot of Christians do themselves a disservice, and this is where I try to be the different. Hopefully, I'm doing what I'm doing here, which is being as shrewd as a serpent and being as harmless as a dove. Hopefully, I don't harm anybody by me expressing what I believe is true north, right? But some people, a lot of Christians, unfortunately, will be as shrewd as doves, which means they're dumb, and as harmless as serpents. And they frickin' hurt everybody because they're stupid arseholes who can't have a little bit of, grace and gentleness and recognition in how to express what is true. There's a difference between being right and being correct in a way that is gentle and, reasonable, right? And I feel like a lot of Christians have just fallen. They don't get this. They don't get the whole concept as shrewd as a serpent and harmless as a dove. They don't get it at all. They're dumb idiots who just bite and hurt, and they're just harsh. It's like, dude, freaking relax. So, anyway, hopefully that's what's coming across for me. I know I can be harsh sometimes, but in terms of this area, hopefully I'm being more gentle than not. So, all right. I know you have to go here soon, so.
That's all right if we go a little bit later, but I'll let you know if he's on the way to come pick me up.
Okay.
So far, so good.
Cool.
Fear God. Therefore, don't be afraid of them, since there is nothing covered that won't be uncovered, and nothing hidden that won't be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the light. What you hear in a whisper, proclaim on the housetops. Don't fear those who kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul. Rather, fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Aren't 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them falls to the ground without your Father's consent. But even the hairs of your head have all been counted. So don't be afraid, therefore you are worth more than many sparrows.
So fundamentally what's being expressed here is, look, I understand when an apple falls off a tree. I get it. I've counted it. I know every apple. I know every single one that's going to hit the earth. Trust me, I care about that apple. I know what's going to happen to it. Trust me also that you're more important than a couple of apples. I've got your hairs numbered. I know everything about you, and I do care. That's what he's trying to get across here. So, Zell getting a little heated sometimes.
Fired up.
Fired up. Yeah. Wait, wasn't that Fairy Tale? Yeah. I have to finish watching that. I've only watched up to like the third season, I think.
I've only seen like the first 10, 20 episodes maybe, but yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I liked it. I thought it was good. All right.
And acknowledging Christ. Therefore, everyone who will acknowledge me before men will also acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before men will also deny him before my Father in heaven. Don't assume that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. You mentioned that earlier.
Right. I think it was coming up.
For I came to turn a man against his father, a daughter against his mother, a daughter-in-law against his mother-in-law, her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies will be the members of his household. Interesting. The person who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. The person who loves son and daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever doesn't take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Anyone finding his life will lose it, and anyone losing his life because of me will find it. Sounds kind of backwards, but
fairly interesting, right? Darth Heb, Merry Christmas. Merry Sithmas. I like it. So, again, Jesus does not explain. I will, just to kind of break it down a bit. But this idea that he's bringing this sword to divide people, that people are going to turn against their own father and mother. And that's primarily because of the culture that they're living in, right? One of the things is even just the Jewish people have a very rigid understanding of what it means to be a follower of God. There is no Jesus as a son in that. It's a heresy to say that if it's not correct, right? So there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of things that he's bringing to the table, different teachings that seem to be contrary to, but actually, if you look at them deeper, especially the spirit, because he talks about the spirit of the law, are actually fulfilled in what he's doing. Prophecy is fulfilled in this person, but other people just won't agree with that. And so by claiming that Jesus is God and that you follow Jesus, you automatically divide a very rigid religious society or a family member, or a family setup. Not staying long. It's Xmas Day here in Australia. Oh, nice. Yeah. It's no doubt. Certainly Christmas Eve. We'll be finishing up here in a bit anyway. So, but thanks for coming in, Darth. And so this is the part that is kind of really important to just briefly go over. The person who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. That's a pretty intense thing to say. And it's important to recognize that what Jesus is expressing here, or what the fundamental truth that the idea of who God is by definition love. Ooh. Like, I don't know why I have it pop up like that so often. And so if you love your father or mother more than God, then you misunderstand what love actually is from this point of view, right? Because God is love by definition. So you're using your limited capacity to love somebody. Whereas if you love God, you love itself, and only then can you truly love anybody else, including yourself. And that's essentially what he's getting at here, is you can't love anybody without God, because you're using love, the very being of God, in the first place. So without God, you don't have love to give. Let's change it to water, for example. I'm going to give my father a cup of water. Well, I need water to give to him, and only God is water, if in this analogy, right? I can only get it from the ocean, and if I don't go to the ocean, if I don't care about that, and I don't take that journey and get that resource, then all I've got is an empty cup to give my father in the first place, or my mother, or my brother. And so it's a recognition that you need to go to the source of love first before you can love in the first place. Otherwise, it's just you're giving a chasm.
It's a shadow of it.
Yeah. You're not giving something that's true, at least in this expression. So, anyway, but it also recognizes that in order to get that source of love, it comes with, like I said, consequences. In this, the cross, which is the Roman symbol of the worst, it's not even the symbol, the actual, very real, worst torture that has ever existed in human history. And so to use that image to take up your cross willingly, to go and suffer willingly and follow me so that you can get love, that's the most important thing, right? And that's why it's recognizing, if you finding your life, you recognize that what you have by itself is nothing, you lose it, right? You recognize the mortality of that's what your life is without anybody up there, creating it in the first place. You don't have anything. You don't have life, right? And therefore, when you realize that I have life, but without God, I lose it. But if you dedicate your life to the giver of life, you will find it. That's why it sounds backwards. It sounds weird. It's very contrary, but that's what he's trying to get across. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Oh my God. I didn't read that. I didn't even know there's a cup of water that comes up next. I was just using that as an analogy anyway. So anyway, go ahead.
A cup of cold water. The one who welcomes you welcomes me, and the one who welcomes me welcomes him who sent me. Anyone who welcomes a prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And anyone who becomes a righteous person because anyone who welcomes a righteous person because he's righteous will receive a righteous person's reward. And whoever gives just a cup of cold water to one of these little ones because he is a disciple, I assure you, he will never lose his reward.
So I like that. Recognizing that the people he's sending out, that he's commissioning, the workers of the field, because just before this obviously said, pray to the Father that he'll send workers out, because there's so much to be done. I need people to help me out. And this is what he's basically saying. It's not like you're not going to get rewarded for this. Don't do it for the reward, but recognize that in and of itself, the journey itself contains that reward. But yeah. Fair enough. Questions? Concepts?
Fair enough.
So would you like a cup of water? I would actually. I have some.
I need to drink some water. Take some pills.
It's good. Well, hopefully, yeah, that was quite a bit actually we went over today, especially with
we went to 9 and 10
poem and everything like that. So it's good.
Good day. Not bad.
Sweet.
We're getting quicker.
We're getting quicker. Well, sort of. Anyway,
we still have the discussion. That's the whole point of.
That's
this.
right. That's right. So. Naturally, anybody who has questions, whether it's on stream or off stream, if you do have something that comes up, could be related to the Bible, it could be related to the Christianity, it could be related to anything. I'm perfectly willing to do it on stream or off stream. If you can send me a message, perfectly happy to do that. But I think we'll end there for today. I know Lunar's got to get going here pretty quick anyway, and we didn't even take a break. Normally we take a break halfway through, and
2 hours is not too bad. I mean, you're supposed to take a break every 2 hours, so we're coming up right on that. So
Thank you for the stream. Thank you for your participation there, Coco. I really appreciate you coming by.